usually give us a count in, don't you?
And it's a big hello and welcome to...
Oh.
God.
3, 2.
Hello, welcome back to the CAIRNcast. This is episode 2. And as usual, I'm joined by my good friend, Aris.
Hello.
And I'm also Robi. And today we're going to be talking about something quite cool. We're going to be talking about starting a cafe. Something along the lines of, so you want to start a cafe,
Yeah.
and here are our top tips.
Yeah.
Might not be quite that
So
succinct.
how
but
to... Starting a cafe for idiots.
Dummies.
Dummies, that's
By dummies.
Yeah, by dummies.
Um,
So we've got a list this week. There's quite a few things to go through when you're setting up a cafe, isn't there?
I mean, it's a pretty sketched together list. It's
Yeah.
not very impressive. One thing I suppose we should say is that it is something we're quite aware of. People say quite often that they'd love to, or they wish they'd start a cafe. They'd love to start a cafe. And I think when you have a normal job, I say normal job, running a cafe is a formidable occupation. But when you have a job working in an office or in the city, as Harris might call it,
in the city.
you'll use your breaks to go out and get coffee often, and I guess you'll then be thrown into this world of bright lights, good smells, fun, baristas having fun, or people genuinely seeming happy.
Yeah, it looks so easy.
And that's an attractive proposition, I guess, for those people, because they're having a good time at that moment.
Yeah.
And we're here to dispel the rumor. No, we're just here to talk about, what we think it takes to run a cafe, and various other bits. So where do we think we should start?
So we'll start at the start with, how do you set it up? So I think we can talk a good bit about your experience here as well. So obviously you need to come up with the idea. It's not, you can't just one day be like, right, I want to run a cafe. Then if you do think that, you need to come up with a brand name. You need to figure out all that kind of stuff. So right from the start, why did you want to set up Cairngorm Coffee? And then how did you come up with that name and idea and all that kind of stuff? Yeah,
the names are not a topic I thought we were going to go down, but actually very interesting. And I got a lot of opinions on names of cafes and what I think is a good approach. So to start, I got into running a cafe because my dad ran a cafe. In the specialty industry, quite rare to have a second generation. But there we go, family business.
Yeah.
So I was working in his cafe for a long time in the summers, and started getting really into coffee. It was quite early on in the specialty movement, when a lot of places were, it was slightly under the radar. It seemed like a kind of craft that was quite elite, and not many people had access to how to craft this product. But at the same time, there were, in the deep, kind of darkest bits of the web, some blogs and some cool forums where people were talking about it. So I got pretty obsessed with that. Living in the Cairngorms, for me personally, not a huge social life at that point, so I was quite happy to dedicate myself to learning what was what. So that was kind of what got me interested. And my dad, who I've spoken about previously, had previous jobs working in marketing, amongst other things, and seemingly was his happiest when he dropped the big corporate jobs and joined this lifestyle of running a cafe. So I decided to try and skip some hurdles and just to start from there.
Do you think, we'll just go on that, back when your dad quit his job at Macallan, I think I remember saying he was 50, so he quits the job at 50.
He went to Baxter's afterwards.
So he did.
Yeah.
Do you think you would have thought he'd still be working now? Back when he decided, he was like, I'm going to run a cafe, I'll be retired in 5 years. Do you think he thought that?
I say honestly, I don't know, but I do know that hospitality and cafes, he in general, he had a great run, and I think there were a lot of businesses that did super well. And throughout the bubble, which was COVID-19, I think it's made it more challenging for people like him to retire, which is savage.
Yeah,
but it's it's a consideration. It's not something we've put down on our pretty haphazard notes again, but it is a thing. Being prepared for these eventualities, whether that is a pandemic or that is the roof falling down. It's a tough thing to navigate.
Well, so you finally settled on a name, Cairngorm Coffee, which I don't think would have taken you too long. And I think very important, don't spend too long in your name. I think from my point of view, branding is very, very important, but doing is much more important. So if it takes you 10 years to figure out your name, that's too long. And
So a lot of it depends on what you want to achieve. Like if your kind of goal is to have a lifestyle business, so in your hometown, and you're selling coffee to the locals of the town, without being condescending, I don't think it matters a huge amount. Whilst we were quite driven on creating brands before we even opened the doors as a cafe. So at that point, I was thinking, well, I'm in this for the long haul, so I'm going to be stuck with this for quite a long time. It's not a case of just taking on a lease and jumping out if I don't really like it. I was pretty set on it. So what I alluded to before about coming up with names was, I think gimmicky names are the worst possible thing to... You can come up with some really cool play on words, but generally speaking, gimmicky names that are very rooted in caffeine or coffee or...
Throw some out there.
I'm not... I don't want to... No, but I don't think
Caffeine
it allows...
corner.
It doesn't allow for, 3 or 4 or 5 years down the line, much scalability, I don't think.
No. So you never thought of calling it Central Perk or something like that?
No. Didn't. No.
Okay, so you've got your company name, your brand, your coffee brand you want to set up. What is next? And, we chat about this a lot. So what's next on this? What's number one? What do you have to do?
Well, so I came up with the name, which was Cairngorm.
Yeah.
Which is named after the Cairngorm Highland Park.
Yeah.
And the next thing you do is get a premise. And obviously our premises were in Edinburgh.
Yeah.
So that was potentially viewed upon as a weird thing to do. And I certainly had this idea in my head, which is now I realize is so ridiculous. But I remember arguing my case to my parents, being like, what if someone agrees to meet at Cairngorm and they think they mean the Cairngorms?
They're actually at Cairngorm Coffee.
As if someone's going to be driving up to Aviemore instead of West End.
Maybe.
But... And for those who maybe aren't aware of Scottish geography, it is maybe 2 hours at least to the Cairngorms from Edinburgh. So, the next one was premise, and we were pretty lucky. We were chatting recently this week about how, with the majority of units that I've looked at, it's felt very seamless.
Yeah.
And the units where it's been a bit more of a challenge, it's generally speaking. I've looked back on and been like, I'm glad I didn't do that.
Yeah.
So the unit we're in right now, you might have seen we've been jumping about a bit. We're in Frederick Street, so the first shop we ever opened. And it's quite apt now.
It's
we're having
almost
this
like
conversation.
sometimes we think about where we're going to be located.
I walked in here. It was a little sandwich shop called Le Sandwich. Again.
Did that.
Getting cancelled in France.
Yeah. That's a really, would you say that's a gimmicky name?
Yeah. So I think it's too specific, which to be fair, it's like calling it the coffee.
Or Le Café.
Yeah.
Right. So
but we're not French.
We digress.
In any case, obviously it's that age-old saying, I don't know whether it was just coined by Kirsty Allsop, but the whole location thing. And it is key because you've got to understand the marketplace very well. Like right now, the kind of demographic and the footfall within the city centre has changed a lot since when we opened.
Massively.
And so depending on what you plan to do, whether it's a kind of community-based cafe or it's a really high-end specialty cafe where you want lots of takeaway, you really need to consider that hard. And I don't think anyone's silly enough not to understand the ramifications of getting the wrong site, But it's important, very important, hugely important.
I think, as we were talking about, a lot of that has changed recently. So obviously city centres have become slightly less popular, and now residential areas like Bruntsfield and Stockbridge in Edinburgh have become much, much more popular as more people work from home. So there's a lot of dynamics that play into stuff like that. Your dad's cafe, for example, completely different. It's located next to a road, but it's a very busy, popular road going north, isn't it? So location and, actually getting the premises is very important. Obviously, what you will find, the hottest locations, the best locations, is very difficult to get premises. I think especially in the current climate. I don't know how you got this 10 years ago. I imagine it was quite a tough market back then as well, 10 years ago. But
for transparency, it was a guarantee from my mum and dad on, I don't know if it was the house or their business, but and that obviously presents an access point. Where it's not everyone's in that position. We're obviously very fortunate that it wasn't necessarily the case that they were giving money, but they were prepared to lose it all essentially. Which is quite a terrifying thought. On on my dad's cafe, talking about premise and location and finding the right place, he had a very clear idea of what he wanted to serve before he came across or before he kind of really went down the route of that location. And that was very much geared towards that quick stop off. So they had freshly made everyday sandwiches, but they packaged them up so they were good to go. And he had that vision for throughout the whole process. And I think that's again where it is, don't just necessarily be on the lookout for a premise. Start to think about what is the vision for the shop as you would like to see it. And then try and really think about, okay, where would that fit within, where would a premise fit within that vision? Because, and he will say, he wouldn't have necessarily been able to copy and paste that in where we've ended up in the centre of Edinburgh and it to have worked perfectly. So it's all horses for courses.
So I'd say that's obviously forms part of, when you are thinking of doing this, obviously a business plan is what you need. And I think business plans, again, can sound quite frightening, but really it's just a giant piece of paper, a notepad where you write down all these kind of thoughts. So like, what is your concept? We talk sometimes, Cairngorm, the basic concept that you started with is coffee and then grilled cheese. But I don't know if grilled cheese was there right from the start, but I think it was. But yeah, so you had a basic concept, what you wanted to do. It's very much the same. Figure out your name, figure out your basic concept, start figuring out then what locations might that work from as well. It's all part of a business plan, essentially.
And I think in hindsight, probably, even though we had the concept of coffee and grilled cheese, which seems quite tight, we branched off too much and we tried to overcomplicate. And it's very easy to get excited in that first year where, if things aren't working quite the way you expected, to get, almost to lose your bottle a wee bit and start thinking, oh, well, what if we also do cold sandwiches and what if we also do confectionery? But every time you do that, you're bringing yourself away from that initial, the essence of what you were trying to achieve. And we talked about it before we started recording, the KISS motto, which is so cringy. But they keep it simple, stupid. It doesn't age like that. It still makes so much sense. Find something which you want to do and do it really, really well. And that's always been quite a strong mantra of us. I think it's served us pretty well.
I think where that is very applicable as well is if you're on a tight budget. You can spread yourself far too thin if you try and do absolutely everything. Like, we'll get on to chatting about equipment in a minute, but and you'll hear how expensive coffee equipment in particular is. But if you then want to add in a bakery side to that, an oven is very, very expensive as well. So, a huge part of that, get your concept dialed in and then, find yourself a location. So you found a location on just off George Street, one of the busiest places in Edinburgh. So what's next? What happens after you find that location?
So what happens after the location? So it was a slight statement of intent taking a unit in the centre of town. I was 24 when that lease was signed. And for some reason I just thought I was more ballsy than I was. I think after the fact I got very, very anxious about the whole thing. But so obviously what you were probably alluding to was the renovation, which by the time we had taken on this lease, not so much the investment of the lease, but it was looming over me that if it took 3, 4, 5 months to do a renovation, which you just never know, that's a considerable investment in itself. So it was very shoestring. And I remember a lot of it was done just by me and friends to begin with.
How long was that shoestring? I think if you'll be transparent now, like how long, as in how much did it cost? And
well,
we
so
can probably...
it has changed a lot
Yeah.
over the years. But, I mean, I should have fished out the invoice. Still got them kicking about. I think... So I found the guys on Gumtree.
Yeah.
And I think...
What, as in need someone to fit out a cafe
Yeah.
post on Gumtree?
With a very clear vision again of what I wanted. I was going to get railway sleepers from my friend's farm.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah. And then he pulled one out and they were like...
Decaying.
There was 100 years of soaked oil inside them.
Yeah.
So we picked them up and they were leaking everywhere. So they ended up going outside. People might remember benches outside. But I then went to a timber merchant, a builder's yard out in East Lothian, and just bought new fabric, like brand new ones, which cost nothing. And that made the countertop.
Nice.
And then we just got tiles I bought online. Everything was just bits and pieces.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it cost more than 15 grand. But
that's mind-blowing now, I think,
Yeah.
isn't it?
like, it wasn't... Obviously, I would say on top of that, we've
got someone piling in the front door now. We're closed today.
Sorry. No, you're fine.
No, it's no problem. They're really... Shut the gate. Right, you're going to have to shut the gate. So £15,000, when we start talking about maybe modern days, let's scale that forward. How much now, if you're going to try and do it yourself, even a do it yourself, you're not getting anywhere close to 15 grand, I don't
It
think.
depends on the size of the unit, obviously.
Yeah.
But a unit this size, if it was a shell, to get to this kind of finish, you could easily spend 40, 50 grand.
Yeah. And that's probably where I think when you go into business, one of the biggest things when you try and fit out a shop or a cafe, one of the biggest things you probably underestimate is how much to fit out will cost and how long it will take. And I think my advice on that would be how long you think it's going to take, double it, and then how much you think you're going to spend, double it as well. So if your budget's 20 grand,
yeah, and does your cash flow give you enough runway to get through that?
100%.
It's important.
I think that's, for me, the hardest bit always with setting it up is you then start getting into the realms of making compromises. So I think that's a good segue in from fit out into equipment. And so I think you'll find that cost really is for the actual, the tiles, the flooring, the countertops, all that kind of stuff. How much does it cost to buy coffee equipment?
Well, so for us, we did a few things, and not things that we would necessarily repeat, but we aligned ourselves with coffee roasters who could give us equipment, and obviously we still then paid a lease rental on that equipment. Yeah, but it would be substantially less than, if they gave it to us. Substantially cheaper because we were buying their coffee, and I think that. A lot of cafes starting out will go down that route.
So you lease a machine, but the flip side of that is that you buy the coffee off the roaster who's leased you the machine.
Yeah, and at that point I signed a contract for that.
For how long?
I think it must have been a couple of years.
Okay.
And I think we had it for 2 months. And then we had serious conversations about the quality.
Of the coffee or the machine or the equipment?
The coffee, yeah.
Oh, okay.
So it was one of those ones where it's like, where this could make or break the business at this early stage. We spent all this money on everything.
Yeah.
We need to find a way of getting out of this, and so some pretty big chats that allowed us to get out of it.
So coming back onto that, as someone who's new to the coffee game, how did you know the coffee was bad?
Genuinely, just customer feedback, because I was none the wiser.
That's incredible.
I was quite happy because and we hopefully will chat to some Edinburgh stalwarts of the coffee industry here. But I learned so much in that first few months. Yeah. And I knew far, far less than I thought I knew. Yeah. Which again, I wouldn't have done it if I wasn't naive enough to think I knew lots about it. Yeah. But it was quite an awakening because there were all of the people I'd done my market research on in Edinburgh, you know, there was Brew Lab, there was Artisan Roast, Machina.
Yeah.
Those are probably the kind of three, and they'd all opened up, bar maybe at Artisan, very recently.
Yeah.
So we were kind of on their coattails.
Yeah.
But they were, you know, ahead of us in terms of they were already doing it.
Yeah.
What I was hoping to achieve, and we got some great feedback. And I think we talked about feedback in a previous podcast.
Yeah, we did.
This is an area where it has helped us.
Yeah.
We had to listen to that feedback, and we got rid of the machine. I went onto eBay and drove down to London to pick up another machine like a week later or something.
Wow. Was there any implications with getting out of that contract? Was that difficult to do? That's another segue for this, is really think long and hard before you sign contracts, I think, probably as an outcome. But, yeah, was it difficult?
So it was and it wasn't. It was awkward, but it wasn't, because it was, and we're not obviously mentioning names, but it was a roaster that my dad had used for many years. So that's how I had worked with that coffee. It was an obvious segue into using it, but he was basically like, had a chat with him at that point just to say, I'll obviously continue to buy from you, but I can't necessarily continue to do that if you force this situation.
And I guess
some big truths coming out.
There is some big truths, and I think though this is part of your journey to become more speciality, probably. So, like, I think if we were to name the name of that roaster, guess in the comments. They maybe would not be what people now would consider a speciality roaster.
Yeah, and I would argue as well that when I was making that decision 9 years ago, there wasn't the breadth of an industry in Scotland and in Edinburgh. Yeah, you know, if I was starting a cafe now at 24, I feel like I would have a lot more awareness about quality and a lot more awareness about, you know, great coffee roasters that I would feel like I would want to work with. Yeah. Back then, I didn't. You know, there just wasn't really that many great local roasters who were, you know, I didn't have access to them. So it was just needs must situation, and the fact that I could get a coffee machine and a grinder and these things weren't going to infringe on what little budget I had, then it seemed like an obvious bet. But it did cost me in the long run. You know, having to buy, and then bought, I think, a £3,500 vintage coffee machine in London, and had to drive down, pick it up, bring it back, and that had its own issues. Which if you ask Paul at Lowdown, he'll tell you about. But there's no, I think going back to it, there's no perfect start. You'll open a shop and you'll get it so wrong. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who will try and do, I've done it myself, you know, consulting for helping you start to try and avoid some of those mistakes. And I do believe that is a good route. But I tried to go down the naive route of thinking I maybe knew more than I did. Yeah.
Now in the future, anyone can just watch this amazing YouTube and they'll know exactly what to do. So I'm going to take this opportunity quickly to open my. We've gone.
Looks like we've been sponsored.
We haven't been sponsored, but we're enjoying some brew gooders today because it's a slightly later filming of the podcast. So we're like, let's enjoy a tasty wee ale.
Are you going to pour yours into the glass?
Absolutely not.
No, me neither.
So I guess still let's stay on equipment, but actually probably I'll just introduce what we want to do around this, I guess, type of podcast. Is that this is almost like our how to run a cafe sort of series, essentially. And as part of that, we're going to interview and speak to other cafe owners, we hope. Yeah. Which I think will be awesome for providing different perspectives. I think a lot of the general themes will still be the same, but if we had 100 people, they would all start their cafe a different way from the way you started it. So this is very much the Cairngorm perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think hopefully what we can kind of achieve from that is what they did wrong almost. You know, I quite enjoy those podcasts where 100%. It's not a sugar-coated success story, because to be honest, the coffee industry, it's a hard work. Like running a cafe, running any hospitality business is tough. It's not easy. It's not an excuse to make quick, easy money.
Yeah.
And attributed to that are probably lots of mistakes and lots of disaster stories down the line. So we've certainly got one or two. I'm sure there are other people who do as well. So we're keen to chat to other people.
100%. So from the Cairngorm point of view, I think, lots of time and effort put into coming up with a name. Did well to source this premises, obviously with help to a certain extent. But then, you think your first real mistake was probably not researching your roasting partner enough, and therefore, that had an impact on equipment and obviously the coffee you're serving. So I guess lesson number one of the most important things about starting your own coffee business is who is going to supply your beans.
Yeah.
And what can they help you with as well. And I think what you'll find now is a lot of roasteries offer equipment on the side. They can get it to you for a discount. Some of them will lease you equipment, some of them will not. So, but again, I'd massively do your own research, but we will always be open to discuss with people this kind of stuff as well. It's not easy to do. And now there's such a wide range of coffee roasters as well. It's probably a more complicated landscape than, what you started in, but at least there's more choice probably to get it right.
I think also on that, price plays a big factor. It certainly did with me. It was one of the reasons I went down that route too. The cost per kilo that I was offered was competitive.
Which was what?
I feel like back then it must have been 14 quid
a kilo.
But what I found the next 2 years of my journey were me flipping that on his head and actively trying and wanting to pay more because I was starting to understand the jump in quality every time you paid more. Coffee's quite a rare commodity that, I think it's specialty coffee especially. I don't think people necessarily base the price because of their brand or because of their reputation. I think it is quite an honest industry where they will base the value on what they paid for it or what the cup score suggests it should be worth. And so I think due to that, you do really get what you pay for. Yeah. And it's a conversation we have quite a lot. It's maybe one we can have another time.
Yeah, definitely.
But about
pricing.
How it is cheapening our prices and potentially sacrificing our quality something we would want to do. Yeah. And it's a very, very tough topic. Yeah. And certainly in this case, the feedback I got wasn't great, and I started to realize, okay, paying less means the quality's not as good.
So when you say that feedback as well, are you getting that through Google reviews? Are you getting that just face-to-face feedback?
It must have been a mix. I do remember once or twice getting people coming in because a new cafe, because honestly, new cafes weren't popping up every week. Yeah. In 2014. So we were very fortunate. That definitely helped us, get some traction. Yeah. But people were intrigued when a new cafe opened up, especially in the centre of town, and so they would come in and ask what the coffee we were using was, and I did sense kind of experience. People. Yeah. I don't know. It was almost like I'd let them down.
Yeah, and so as well, it's probably important to say that is around 2014 time. So, third wave coffee, as it's called, was still in its infancy, but a few years in by then. Yeah, there would have been enough people wandering around, being like, "I know what a good cup of coffee tastes like," versus Starbucks, Cafe Nero, Black Sheep. Other brands are available, and
I feel like I'm thinking about what I'm talking about, and I want to go back to just very quickly a quick caveat that the coffee we were getting from this roaster, it's not that it was bad, and it's not that they were sourcing it badly. It's not, the coffee was good. It's just the vision I had from day one about what I wanted to achieve of building this brand. It felt like it wasn't honouring that opportunity enough.
Yeah, we've chatted about that, I think, even today around pick your lane. So obviously your lane was coffee, whereas someone's lane might be baking. I think businesses, for example, in Edinburgh, like 12 Triangles, they're absolutely smashing their baking out of the game. that's probably what they focused on to start with, and then you try and add in the coffee probably on the side, whereas your focus right at the start was, right, I need my coffee to taste absolutely fantastic, because that's why people, I've got coffee in my name.
Yeah, 100%.
So if I'm not giving good coffee, then I'm not really giving anything.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, we've segued quite a lot. I want to come back to equipment, because I think it's important for a lot of new, not yet. Jack's wanting his crisp break so he can just get munching into crisps.
Is there any left?
I don't know, there is. How much is equipment? I think that's probably a big headline that non-coffee people listening to this maybe will not understand the cost of, that machine sitting there, the grinder behind it. Yeah. There's 2 grinders in here. They're not even, they're relatively fancy, those grinders. But, right, so give me some numbers.
Well, those grinders are $2,500 each. That's $5,000 in grinders. And then mind-blowing.
It is mind-blowing.
I don't know if that is called, is that RRP? Yeah, it must be.
A lot, just to grind beans.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm trying to remember what's RRP and what.
I think it's about 10 to 12 grand RRP, that one, is it not?
Yeah.
We do sell them.
Yeah, I think it's
if you're in the market for a coffee machine,
quite good salesman.
We'll get you the price.
Don't know how much anything costs.
And it will always be.
Take note.
Yeah.
Find out price of equipment we sell.
Yeah.
But that's currently the cheapest machine we have in our shops.
Yeah.
It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
So we're talking. We bought our San Remo Opera, and I think that was 14.5 or 15 grand, and that was 5 years ago, maybe.
So I'm an accountant here, so we're starting to stack up costs. So you've signed your lease, you maybe had to pay a deposit, so let's say 3 months rent or whatever. So that's say 5 to 10 grand, depending on what your rent is up front. You've then got your fit out costs, which we're saying you managed somehow to do this for 15 to 20, which is great. So now you'd maybe be 30 to 40. So you add that on, so you're maybe up to 40, 50 grand just to get the place looking good.
So we got this counter redone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Must have been 2 years ago now, a year, and it was 12 grand, I think.
Just to do the counter.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Pretty bad, isn't it?
So you're at 50 grand already-ish, and then you add on your equipment on top of that. So, the equipment probably takes you close, to 60, 70 grand to set up. I think that's, when we chat about it, that sounds roughly in line. If you're opening a 500 square foot cafe, that's probably your cost. You can cut corners in certain areas. There's probably certain areas you can't cut corners. I would say machine is one of those.
So that's what, like £100 per square foot to fit it out.
Yeah.
Seems about
including equipment.
Including equipment.
Yeah. So a lot of money. And I think that's another thing. It's, you hear this a lot when people are talking kind of motivationally about setting up your own business. Save up some money first. If you do want to do this, figure out where you're going to get your funding from is very, very important. That's going to come from your own savings as well. That's a big call to make, because not every cafe is going to work. So if you plow 50, 60, 70 grand or more in, you might not get your money back, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And I think we had a fairly big safety net. I think the story is the money that helped to really kickstart us. There were various means, but the one I think is quite a fun story is that when my dad had worked in Macallan, he'd saved up some rare bottles. Yeah, he sold an auction, and that money was attributed to setting up Cairngorm.
Imagine what they'd be worth now.
Yeah,
probably more than Cairngorm.
He doesn't want to think about that.
That was good.
But yeah, certainly, that is always going to be the biggest hurdle. Is like, how do you get money? So us personally, we're talking quite candid here. Yeah, we have an overdraft facility. Yeah, which helps a lot. We obviously now have a bounce back loan, but we've also had other loans. We've had loans through our credit card facility where you pay back an additional percentage for everything you sell. So instead of being 1.5 or 1, whatever it is, 2%, you might pay back 6 for a period until it's paid back. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of those because you've actually got to be making money to pay it back. Yeah, it's not just a case of they're coming knocking, even if you're closed. Yeah, which is great.
So, well, I guess we're at the point where you can open your cafe doors. So that's kind of where we've got to in terms of chatting about all this. We should maybe stop for our crisp break now. I think that's a good stop. I'm also going to have to go and get my haircut. I'll come back looking fresher.
Oh, yeah.
But after the crisp break, let's talk about then that first 6 months. What do you do once you've opened your doors, like staffing? Yeah. And then I think next after that, we're going to talk about, right, you're actually making some money. You're a successful cafe owner, but you work 7 days a week. How do you go from being an owner-operator potentially? Do you even want to no longer be an owner-operator? Is that where you want to go? How do you go from an owner-operator into maybe running multiple cafes? So,
yeah, and I think those two are completely different businesses. And it'll be interesting to pick them apart, I guess, those two different facets. So
it will be.
Yeah. Are we talking about the crisps?
Yeah, so they are Mackies.
Oh, the Mackies, we're going ahead.
Lightly salted ridge cut. Another very, very good crisp. I think you guys maybe will say they're a bit bland, not that exciting.
They're a bit soggy. I don't know. Have you been drooling on them or something?
Not crunchy. You can hear
we
that
did
crunch.
Pick a good thing to eat on camera.
You can hear the
Probably
crunch.
repulsive for people listening.
They're really good crisps, I would say. And again, ridge. When you're dipping ridge, you get it all in there, which is good. Great crisp. I think while we're on this as well, on the break, we should maybe talk about some of this cool new merch that we are launching.
It actually feels great.
As good as it looks.
No, I look. Another pod for another time, but we've sold a lot of merch in our time, which this is a very good iteration of it, I would say.
Eating crisp. So, talk us through it. What are they all about? What are these sweatshirts all about? And when will you be able to purchase them?
So we've wanted to do this for a long time. We don't know if someone else has done or not. Though you're holding the mic for me to speak into that one. Interviewing me. We don't know if someone has done this before. They maybe have. And there's no such thing as a new idea. But the idea is we have, in this series, processing methods. Yeah. So we've got carbonic maceration.
Ways to process a coffee.
So the common terms would be washed, natural, maybe even honey. We do have a anaerobic honey.
Lovely lilac.
Will also be dropping. We just thought it's quite a fun thing for people to nerd out on.
Yeah, in the niche coffee industry. Yeah. So mine says thermal shock. Can you explain to me what a thermal shock?
We've never had a thermal shock coffee.
Nobody knows.
But that one is
genuinely nobody knows what the process is.
We'll give all proceeds of that to Dear Green maybe, because they've got a thermal shock coffee.
Oh, do they?
It's delicious.
Oh, that's awesome.
I think that's the Yeni Esperanza that Matt talks about nonstop.
That's good. Yeah, so we've got 3 going so far. Carbonic maceration.
Not to be confused with other words begin with M.
Tongue twister and a half, that one. We have thermal shock and we have anaerobic honey. So available from Thursday. Get your
tomorrow.
Mitts on them.
If you're watching this on Wednesday,
that's good. You managed to do
1st of February. Which is cool. Do you know the great thing about all this chat is I've actually in 10 minutes got a FaceTime call. Well, they cancelled it.
Oh.
So let's be with my marketing team.
Well, I've got my haircut in 10 minutes, so I'll come back not wearing a hat, looking super sharp.
Why?
Okay.
Okay, so a quick one. We haven't given this any...
any creeds?
No, I don't want to say creeds. I feel like that joke's going too far.
No, I don't, because
it's not a joke.
It's not a joke.
It's a serious thing. But how many
creeds
would you give those crisps out of 10?
I really, really like them, but I'm aware that I've really liked all of the crisps we've had. Yeah. So I'd say they're not as good as the Torres one, so I'm going to go, they're probably a 7 creeds out of 10.
I'm quite pragmatic, so people probably really rate my opinion because I don't just... I was going to say...
I love crisps!
Yeah, don't get excited over every single crisp that enters my mouth, but I eat a lot of crisps, that's probably why. I'm quite an experienced crisp eater.
I can tell.
But I'd probably give it 5 or 6. because it's mainly it's mainly the flavor, and that's not a diss on the crisp manufacturer. That's a diss on the person who selected the flavor of crisps.
I'm going to tag the
sea salt is quite a boring flavor.
James Taylor.
Mackey's crisps are the best. But
You know James Taylor well, and you're absolutely banging his crisps here.
I thought we said he was selling the business. Hopefully, he agreed a price.
No, he's not. He's continuing with the business.
Oh, is it?
Aside. Back to running businesses.
Yeah.
We're talking about running coffee businesses. So we have successfully opened our shop. It's trading super duper well. There's people coming in, buying coffees every day.
So this is in theory?
No, this is where we're at now on this journey. No, so yeah, that's happening.
People are loving it.
Well, I guess so. Yeah, first 6 months of Frederick Street opening.
Yeah.
How did that pan out?
So and again, it's all relevant to what we were saying before. There weren't that many openings.
Yeah.
So I think it went as well as a really probably
Coffee issues aside.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like it was working, and I think we've been a very organic growth business to this stage. So I think I had quite realistic expectations. I wasn't expecting it to, to go gangbusters. Having said that, I did get some assurance from my dad I'd be able to buy a flat after the first year of trading if I worked hard enough. But now, on reflection, I think he was just trying to get me to work hard.
Is that what we'd call like actual boomer logic? So he was buying flats for $5,000 back in the 1960s, and now he's like, work hard for a week and you'll buy a flat. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. Yeah, there was a bit of that maybe. I don't know. In any case, Edinburgh property prices are extortionate.
So you didn't buy a flat?
So I did not. I continued to rent off my friends.
Interesting. So fast forward then 1/2 years.
Yeah.
And Frederick Street's running well. So you are now at the point where you have a choice to make.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working 5 days, probably more a week in this cafe. Do I retire now? And is this the rest of my life? Am I just going to work in this cafe for the rest of my life? Or am I going to try and grow the business, maybe get multi-cafe? Probably the roastery conversation is not even on the horizon yet. You're just thinking about maybe another cafe. So what happens next?
Well, in fact, we don't want to jump around too much, but we did think about starting a roastery pre the cafe. But decided, pre Frederick Street.
Oh, wowzer.
But actually, in hindsight, the decision was the right one because, and I think anyone who starts a business will understand the amount you learn in that first 1-2 years is unparalleled. So if I'd gone to the route of, the product, so trying to roast the coffee, obviously I would have learned a lot, but it's a real expensive risk attached to that. Because a roasting machine isn't much cheaper than the fit out for the cafe, and then you're playing with hundreds of pounds of batch roasting at a time. So, long story short, I learned a lot in that 2 years, and I learned enough to know that it probably wasn't the lifestyle which I had craved. I wanted to build, as I said before, a brand, and I wanted to really push myself as far as I could. I think probably at that point, being probably 25, 26, there was no way I was going to settle for, I was young enough that there was just not, it was just never a consideration for me at that point that I would be happy with one shop.
I think as well, so that's a very Cairngorm and you specific answer. So I'll maybe come back to people who do want to set up a single cafe from a lifestyle perspective.
Yeah.
And we're kind of chatting off air again about how you need to get your numbers right, essentially, because if you don't get your numbers right and don't make enough money, you will be in there 7 days a week, serving coffees, cleaning machines, cleaning floors. So you need, if you're wanting that lifestyle type business, it needs to be able to provide you with enough money to live the life as well that you want to live. And obviously that means nobody, I doubt, is setting up a lifestyle business wanting to work there 7 days a week. So I think that's an important factor. Like if you are going to be an owner operator and that's the route you want to do forever, how do you give yourself some free time? But I don't think we're going to answer that because that's not your experience.
This doesn't really answer the question, but talking about the concept of the owner operator in a specialty coffee sense, I actually think that the majority of fantastic cafes in that specialty coffee world are owner operator. Like it's almost a completely different beast to then scale that. It's so hard, when the success is based on a very, very temperamental product.
Yeah.
Having the right processes in, and the amount of variables that need to be absolutely on the money, to expand that beyond one shop, beyond two shops, to 10 shops and beyond, is very tough, to the point that there are lots of fantastic cafes which are a standalone cafe with the owner in there every day.
Can
checking
you name
in
check
quality
for us? Who would you say? Like, if someone's wanting to look, who should they be looking at from that owner operator point of view? Well, we work with a couple, so
weirdly, the ones that now spring to mind are ones that have expanded beyond that. But my first experience going to the Barn in Berlin, it was one shop, and it was incredible. He has successfully gone beyond that. Obviously, closer to home, you've got the likes of Lowdown, who the quality is unparalleled. And that takes a certain amount of biting my tongue, because we've got a shop near them, but we see it as a constant inspiration for us to keep on pushing ourselves. There was another cafe in London, one of my favourites, that now actually is based in Perth. It owns Manifesto, which was McIntyre's in London. It was fantastic. It was like an owner-operator vibe. And by that, I think you can go beyond one shop, but I think it's very much the idea of the owner still having a touching point on every decision that's made. Yeah. And it can make a real difference to the quality of everything. To have all of your staff connected directly to the person who came up with the concept, made the rules, and set out the framework for the quality within the shop can be a really great thing. Obviously, what we'll go on to talk about was I went beyond that. I was very keen to not do that. Yeah. And it wasn't just that I didn't want to be involved with the shop in that capacity, but I knew that quite early on, if my vision was to scale beyond one shop, beyond two shops, I had to almost be slightly disconnected from the shop. Yeah. I didn't want to have the environment where people come have a chat with me, because that then almost seals the fate of your success as a business. Yeah. If you want to scale.
I agree.
And that was the decision I made quite early on, that I was trying to get the shop running itself and be as self-sufficient as I possibly could, which in turn gave me the freedom to then go on to the next shop.
Cool. I'm just going to name check a couple more as well on top of that. So we obviously work with EH9. We sell them. We roast a special coffee for them, which they sell, single origin espresso. Great cafe, definitely worth a follow on Instagram and TikTok as well. I think very much one where you can see part of their journey as well on their social media feed. I think they're quite an interesting cafe to follow for sure.
And they're a great example of a cafe which it feels like he's got a similar mindset, in a way that he's starting to craft the next. He's got Lewis, who's the head barista, who he can trust implicitly to guide the coffee within the shop. And I think that's the key. At the end of the day, if you do want to scale, it comes down to getting the right people involved with you.
We'll chat about
it's the only way. It's the success or failure of the business is whether you can go away on holiday and the quality is up to scratch.
100%. I think another one where our wholesale manager Matt used to work as well in Glasgow space. Obviously, Connie, the owner of that, huge. And I think that's one in particular where you can see that her focus translates to the coffee she has in the shop, basically, doesn't it? And that's the different. Again, I think being really clear on what your business model and business plan is, and then sticking to it. And there's no reason a business plan and business model can't change. You get 3 years down the line, but I would say clearly plan your first couple of years and stick to it, and then lift your head up, and maybe you can change after that. Which I think is what we're kind of saying. A lot of your favorite owner operators at the start probably did that. They nailed what they were doing at the start, and they were like, "Oh, this has maybe provided me the platform to grow."
Definitely, and I think the clearer the concept and the clearer the kind of vision for the business, the easier in the long run it is to scale. So the Barn being a perfect example, the experience I had when I went in there, I don't know how long ago, 6 years ago maybe, was the experience that I've not been many times since, but the experience that I can see from their social media, from the owner, the founder discussing it, it seems like it's still, the vision is very clear. They wanted to make single origin their whole focus, and they worked with seasonal lots that they revisit year on year. There's a real ethos that has been kind of ironed out quite early on, and I've seen them through to, well, they're now scaled to internationally. They've got 3 shops, I think, internationally, so pretty amazing. The other one not far away is Coffee Collective in Copenhagen, where the experience I had there, I've had multiple times when I've revisited, and it is definitely something that is the hardest to do. Finding an individual, clear vision and concept for your business is challenging. But if you can nail it early on, then the scalability of the business feels more natural. If you really know what you're doing, it's easier to then take that and continue it. If it's a little bit wishy-washy, it's hard to really make a dent in an industry, I think.
Interesting.
It's quite deep.
It is. I'm going to show my management consulting kind of strategy background here as well, in the sense that when a market is growing, so like specialty coffee has been growing, say, for the last 10, 15 years, it gives you more leeway as well. Obviously, yes, those brands nail it. But if the general trajectory of the overall market is growth, in that more and more people are wanting to drink specialty coffee, if you're doing the right things, you should also grow. I think part of the trouble sometimes, and we're probably not in a period yet where specialty is shrinking, but I think growth is probably slowing versus what it was 10 years ago. But if you're starting a cafe in specialty industry now, the growth potential probably isn't as quick as maybe it was then. If you get it right, then you really could ride that kind of wave up. So I think it's important to do that kind of research as well. Overall, what is the specialty industry looking like? So, is there another
Brewdog success story in craft beer? It's it's hard to replicate that growth. In the same way that I guess a Blue Bottle in specialty coffee was, the scalability was huge, and the end result was the guy made a tidy pocket.
He did, and I think it's important to say that as long as you have a clear concept and a good business and you run it really well, I think it will do well. It's probably when times are good, it's easier to do well running a business, I guess. Your business might not be as good as everyone else's, but it might still do well, I guess, is what I'm trying to say there. Let's fast forward to Frederick. It's doing well. How do you get away from being behind the bar 5 days a week making coffees to opening a second shop?
Again, just staff. It comes down to hiring good staff. I think at that stage, hiring staff to replace your job but still paying yourself a salary is challenging, because it's obviously your salary then goes into the overheads of the business. You're not really doing a benefit to the business, and I think that's challenging. You obviously are. There's a lot you're doing.
100%.
I think that's something that I battled with a lot in the early days. I still do. Whereas a case of if I'm doing something like, heaven forbid, working from home on admin, on payroll, and on marketing, even all these little things that need to be done, then I often felt like I was doing my staff a disservice, or they would be wondering what I'm up to. And I think that is something that is very hard to get over. I would think 9 out of 10 business owners would share that same that feeling, slight feeling of guilt in the early days, when you're so used to being there on the front line, and you're all a part of a team, and then suddenly you're sitting at home doing stuff and not interacting with them. It can be quite challenging. But it's super important. You can't scale business unless you take a step back. And some people try, and the result is that you're going to have to split your time between the two anyway. If you open another business. So I think it's important to start as soon as you possibly can, to start allowing the business to breathe on its own and get used to that.
Yeah.
And then really it gives you a good indication of whether the business is, you know, if it is a small lifestyle business or if it is a business that can successfully scale.
Yeah.
If you can continue to pay yourself and not work on the tools, as it were.
Yeah.
It's quite a good indication. And early indication for us was good. Like Frederick Street was busy. We were selling food and coffee. We were years away from a pandemic. Everything was looking pretty rosy, to be fair.
Good.
And it felt like the right time to make the next move.
So you found Melville.
But we actually found another unit
that
we paid lawyers' fees on, had the lease written up in front of me, and then the last minute I bottled it.
Where was that?
In the Waverley Arches. Yeah. Where Room and Rumours is.
Oh,
not that actual unit, but further down.
Along that
One
area.
of those.
Wow. Why? What was the... Why?
I almost just was not 100% sure about it. There was talk of them continuing to build new Waverley, and I loved the concept of it. I thought this has to work. It's really like romantic thought of being in an archway. Like it seemed to work, but the more I thought about it, the more, you know, I'd been in an environment which was small. This would have been maybe even smaller or the same kind of space. It was very much a takeaway. Yeah. And it was essentially signing a lease to become a guinea pig on a new project. Yeah, which it didn't have any track record. So this is before any of them had opened.
I would just jump in there. I would say for any business owners, especially startup business owners, being someone else's guinea pig I would never ever recommend doing that. Yeah. It's not on you to try and figure out for someone else what things should work, what prices work, will footfall be good enough. So, you know, I think it is a risk if you want to take on a new location, which is unproven, massive risk. But I think now, in hindsight, it's great. I think that's a cool location.
It's not the only lease we've pulled away from, like a very, very late stage, and I've not regretted either. No regret. And I think, you know, you've got to have convictions that you know what's best for your own business. Yeah. At that time, when I was thinking, okay, I've paid all these lawyers' fees, I should probably just do it. Yeah. But signing up to 10-year lease was all these kind of things. And, you know, obviously now we're getting to this age where we're thinking, Christ, I'm going to be mid-40s by the time that lease is finished. Yeah. Just scaring yourself. It wasn't quite as bad back then. Yeah. But it was still, it was still a real consideration. I think not long after I was almost ready to pull out, I drove past Melville. Yeah. And saw a to-let sign. And then arrange a viewing, and I was like, it's a no-brainer.
Which, and again, now in hindsight, so Melville was an estate agent prior to that, wasn't it? So in hindsight, I think a lot of people were driven past that unit and thought, not had the same thinking as you had. But I think the rest is history. It's now a great coffee shop in a great location. But again, I'll come back to the point around there's deposits to pay, there's fit out. I think Melville's about 1,000 square feet. Yeah. So earlier in the conversation we said roughly 100 quid per square foot. I think you're a bit lower there because the equipment cost is roughly the same, maybe slightly higher. But I remember, I think conversations we've had that, you know, Melville was close to 80,000 pounds, 70 to 80,000 pounds to fit out. So stumping up a lot of cash again 2 years into your business. Easy?
Easier when you are actually turning over money. Yeah. Not necessarily great profit. Yeah. But for some reason, it just feels I felt less insecure about spending money when I knew the next week I'd be making more. It's like, you know.
I think that also turning over opens access to facilities like overdrafts. Yeah. Like the PayPal sort of capital schemes that they do, where you can obviously raise money through that. So. Yeah, it's a bit easier once you've got going. It's still borrowing money though, isn't it? Which is not ideal. Sure. Wow. I guess it's another one of those things where it makes you think, doesn't it? You know, it's a decision to be made. Yeah,
and you should never borrow money unless you've got a fantastic business plan that's foolproof, or you have every confidence in yourself that you're not going to stop. Yeah. Any cost to be able to pay it back. Yeah. And I probably had more of the latter than the former, but you know, still, I've never been naive enough to not, you know, spend a bit of time and just sketch out costs and try to understand as much as possible, even without a huge amount of kind of accountancy background.
Yeah.
You know, like I've tried pretty hard to understand what I'm letting myself in for, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate again that it's not all blind belief. I come from
Second
generation cafe. I'm a second generation cafe owner, and so you know, I had in the first instance like a reference point for a lot of decisions, like how much should you spend on staff, like things like that.
How much should you spend on staff?
Well, we think no more than 25% of your turnover.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a big outgoing, but it's probably 20 to 25%, depending on how you run your business.
Yeah.
In terms of like how much service is added and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah. So obviously, the higher the service, the higher that percentage goes, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's maybe something we could quickly jump into, just very high level. Kind of round what sort of figures you make in a coffee shop. Again, I think people maybe sitting there think, open my doors, maybe I'll do £500,000 of coffees. But again, you're selling a product which is now £3.50. Yeah. 10 years ago, it was £2.20 maybe. Yeah. How many coffees do you have to sell to make £100,000? Do that math.
I am like, we're obviously, sorry, what was the question?
£2 a coffee and £100,000 turnover. How many coffees are you selling?
50,000.
It's a lot of coffees, isn't it?
Yeah, that is a lot of coffees. And obviously in the kit we had, which was the vintage coffee machine, it was quite challenging. Yeah. I'm just having like, as we're unpacking this, I'm having things that were tucked in the back of my head that are terrifying me. I remember my dad admitted like quite far into it that he was pretty nervous because we weren't making what we thought we would make.
But and again, it's interesting though, your dad's business model is different from yours. So service is probably not lower quality, but there's less service necessarily than there is a Melville style cafe in Relea, isn't there? So then his percentage of staff costs is lower than yours. Yeah. I always find it interesting. I always chat to people about this, that all that can bubble around. You've got your rent, you've got your staff, you've got your cost of beans, all that food. I'm always like, your business should make as a minimum 10% net profit, and that keeps you, as long as you're making roughly 10%. So if you're turning over 100 grand, you end up with 10 grand at the end of the year. And we're chatting off air. So you knock your pan in for a year at Frederick Street. Let's say it turns over 200 grand. You've done, 50,000 coffees. You've done 20,000 grilled cheeses. It's a lot of work. Mm-hmm. And you end up with 20 grand at the end of the year. Yeah. And I think that is important for people to understand as well. So you can either pay yourself that 20 grand or you can reinvest that into trying and opening another shop.
And and it's not even just reinvesting. It's you should always, you need to have a buffer. And we've talked about this a lot. It's like, if you want to scale, 20 grand isn't even a big buffer.
No.
So
you won't even buy a counter.
Pay yourself nothing. Yeah. And then you're still,
And I think that's probably an important bit. I don't know how much we've got left on the list, because obviously we could go into the roastery sort of chat as well, but that's not really specific to running a cafe.
Well, we could maybe talk about that another time.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, almost it's important to have that in your head. And I think that's for running any business. Like, know your numbers, know that, this rough size of space, maybe I can do 100, maybe I can do 200,000. What has to go well for you to do 200,000? Like we're saying, it's a hell of a lot of coffees. And then 10% is a low profit margin, I would say. That is the profit margin you'd be making if you've got really high staff costs and you're buying the fanciest beans. But again, you should probably scale your pricing to factor that in as well. But it's a long year to only earn £20,000.
We could really scare people right now and tell them some of the days trading we've had as a business has been going 8 years and reopening a cafe.
Right in here.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing. Yeah. I don't know if we actually want to.
Yeah, you can. I think so again, we're talking, how big's Frederick Street? I think it's 400 square feet, maybe.
It's 560, I think, including the back. Which is relatively tiny. Sorry.
So yeah, let's say 500 square feet. In retail, I work. Is he back in focus? In retail, I work off a kind of policy of £500 per square foot is roughly what you should turn over per annum. Coffee's probably not a million miles away from that either. So we're in a 500 square foot cafe. You want to probably be hitting £200,000 ish. Well, maybe a bit lower, but And we're not. There's that out there. Frederick Street since reopening.
Well, but the question we've had, not the question, the conversation we've had often is, it was always designed, it wasn't always designed. It always worked in that early period as that owner operator. You know, when I was here, then it was when we started moving away. That's when it became tricky. But at that point, then, and this is something to consider, the more cafes you open, that overhead that you cover is split between shops, so your salary is divided.
Yeah.
Which helped a lot, I guess. I've got lots of views on cafes and what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah.
And this sounds like a bad thing I might get pelters from people who try this and it fails, but I'm always like, you should make your cafe as big as you possibly can afford to do.
Yeah.
Not just because it's good to have ambition, but I think you'll find that you will put as much work into a 300 square foot cafe as you will into a 3,000 square foot cafe. It will be a lot of added stress. There'll be a lot of extra things to think about and more staff to cover.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, if you're running a business, it is extremely hard work.
Yeah. And
you might as well make some better cash doing it.
Yeah, so I agree. And I think all that comes down to then is, like we said at the start, how much cash do you have to start with? So obviously you started with a 500 square foot because you couldn't have started with a 5,000 square foot. So
yeah, absolutely, that's true.
That is, a big part of it. And then it's something Robbie and I talk about a lot, and maybe something we can chat about later on, because it's definitely going to be part of our journey, is fundraising. And I think, if you are only, let's say you're turning over £1 million a year and you make 10% profit, that's generating £100,000 a year, which you can reinvest in your business. As we've chatted about, that maybe isn't enough then. You want to open up a bigger cafe.
Ooh.
You want to open up a bigger coffee shop. £100,000 maybe doesn't. That's a 1,000 square foot shop that we just discussed. So it's very, very interesting that, and I think you listened to a Jamie Lang podcast recently where he was saying getting to £1 million of turnover is extraordinarily difficult. And then after that, he said getting to 10 million is basically impossible.
Yeah.
And I think
then after that, I think that's when it snowballs, but
gets a bit easier. But I think it's again important to have that in your head. And I think we've got that milestone in our head around £1 million. Hopefully we'll hit that in 2023.
Yeah. We're not hitting it in 2023.
We were supposed to hit it in 2022. We'll have a check. Yeah, we need to get the accounts.
Yeah. I keep on. We need to get those accounts. No, pay someone else to do it. That's another thing. Yeah.
But in 2022, so like the calendar year, the accounting year doesn't run the same as the calendar year. I'm trying to set them up like that. But yeah, I think it's important to realize that scaling without cash is very, very difficult. Where are you going to get your cash from? Can you pay it back? All that kind of stuff.
But yeah, I think going back to the start almost, it is... There's two different. You can run coffee in so many different aspects, but you can run a cafe as one owner operator, single unit, and make money.
Make £50,000 a year profit.
Yeah, but it's not easy money. I think going right back to the start, talking about people view it as a kind of an opportunity to make easy money when they're having fun, and I would say from my experience that is.
Can you tell me something?
It's not that it's not fun, but it's it's much harder work than I thought it would be.
Who's making easy money? Lawyers?
Jack sells T-shirts online and does quite well. Not easy money.
It's not easy money.
No.
Yeah, I think
consultants, I think, probably do okay.
I would probably agree with that. I think until you start running a business, again, I come from a consulting background.
Oh, there we go.
Until...
Are you not also a day yacht skipper or something?
God,
there's many strings to his bows, which is quite commendable.
I'm also learning to code at the moment. So.
Interesting.
Yeah. Amazing what you can do. When
I'm actually a professional musician as well. Played a gig to some people once. And paid £30.
What was I rambling on about there? Myself. Yeah.
No, talking about consulting.
So I think people should be aware, starting a business, is extraordinarily difficult.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that is difficult is the 24/7-ness of it. It takes so long to get out of the 24/7.
Yeah.
And that's something we're talking about. Owner-operators, you need to get to a point as an owner-operator when you can have days off.
Yeah.
You know, you might shut the shop. Say you run a coffee shop as an owner-operator. You might shut it for 2 days a week, open it for 5. You're probably still doing accounts, all sorts of admin
For sure.
on your other 2 days. So it's important to realize that, you know, how quick can you get to that point where you actually can take some time off? And I think, again, it's a tough situation to get to.
This all sounds like far too much work. I'm like,
Naivety is the great,
Yeah.
I think, like you talk about, is probably the best part
Tool.
of starting a business is
Yeah.
that you just don't know. But like, we talk about our dads quite a lot as well. My dad always said, what is literally the worst that can happen? Like, you try and start a business, you lose the money you put in, you can go get a job.
yeah, you said that to me before as well.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
trying
I
to
don't know
make
what
me feel
job you would
comfortable.
get.
Well, you know, like you can reinvent yourself.
Yeah, you
3
be
times
a-
after you're 35. I'm like, it's not the end of the world.
I'm not allowed to say
Honeybee.
100%. Honeybee.
Honeybee. That probably concludes. I think that's been
Yeah.
last. How long was that then?
I
We
think
don't know. An hour and 10 minutes.
it's not been an hour 10. I think
Ring the bell. That's a new record.
I think segment 1, part 1 was.
Oh,
Wow.
my
It's
word.
an important topic,
Yeah,
I think, and
and it can. Yeah,
hit us up if you ever want to chat about it, because I think it's something I think people underestimate, maybe, again, how much you are aware, you know about setting up a coffee shop. So I think hit us up. I thought one of the segments we wanted to do every week as well, I want to read out positive reviews.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I know we've got
do we have one?
we've got a banger, I think, for Frederick that we can
Have we?
read out. But
If anyone does want to contact Robi, his email is Robi@Cairngorm.
probably at Cairngorm Coffee.
No. I don't
Yeah.
like people emailing me.
Yeah.
I'm
So
tired.
somehow Robbie's managed to create a situation where all emails in the business are directed to other people apart from him, but he gets all the bills basically. They come to him.
Get all the pelters.
Yeah, so I think saying that, obviously we reopened Frederick Street as we've talked about before in September. It has been we've been surprised. It's been on an upward trajectory, but it obviously is. It's a difficult location now versus pre-COVID. But we have been very, very happy with how it's performed. Robbie's really struggling to find this review.
Which one was it? The
I
one
don't
from
know,
Jack McCauley. So glad they've reopened this location.
Thanks, Jack.
Thanks, mate.
Why? You don't even drink coffee. Hot chocolates are dynamite, though.
Oh, do you want me just to read a random one? Okay.
Read a random, really positive one.
You put like fancy music over this bit. Okay.
See how...
A little, cute, and cozy coffee shop. I had a delicious chai latte and my fiance had a cappuccino with a butter croissant. Everything was delicious. Friendly staff, I definitely have to visit them again. 5 out of 5, 5 out of 5. Atmosphere, 5 out of 5.
Yes, what a review. Staff are friendly. Staff are not naff. Great. That's a great review.
One final thing, we got pop shields, so you're welcome.
Yeah, sorry.
Less pops.
Also, yeah, we're wrapping up. I'll save the alsos for next time. Thank you very much
Cheers.
for listening.
See you soon. And again, CAIRNcast.
Like and subscribe. An hour long. There's bits in there, Jack. There's bits in there.
Turn that down.
You can clip that.
I'm not cutting that.